up, which ironically is the ultimate form of protest, isn't it? You know, you think of the monk, you know, who starts burning himself in a town square to protest some war or something like that. It's self-immolation is the ultimate act of protest, and Marxism enshrined protest as the ultimate virtuous act. And it doesn't matter who's doing it as long as you are expressing oppression. So it's funny because what you have with repressive tolerance, I thought the whole Gina Carano thing was so fascinating. Or of course, Black conservatism has faced this constantly, is the moment you refuse to be a victim, you are suddenly expunged from the coalition of the aggrieved. So Gina Carano just being one of the more recent ones, she's a woman, so in terms of power structure, she's supposed to be one of the minorities. So then anything she says, by definition, is supposed to be allowed, right? No, except when you start sounding like the dominant power group, then you're cast out. In other words, you're only allowed in this coalition of the aggrieved if you agree to subsume yourself to a permanent status of victimhood. And how can people ever do something like that? You exalt victimhood to the highest level of virtue. And then the most absurd expressions of that are Meghan Markle and Oprah Winfrey. the most privileged people on the planet are trying to portray themselves as victims.
Yeah. I would say something about Oprah. I love Oprah. She loves me. She just don't know it, man. Trying to make me jealous with studying it. It ain't working. Call me, baby. Let's get together.
That's a big bank account, Corbin.
Hey, brother. Yeah. So, look, brother, let me. We're going to have to finish up a little bit, but before we do, though, how did you get into this? What's your quick story there? 20 books, brother. You're active, but you're showing some commitment there. What's going on with you? How'd you get involved in this?
Well, I was doing doctoral studies out at University of Durham, which is in the UK, and I came across a field of study called post-secular studies. I couldn't believe it, actually, when I found it was back in 2008. And the basic argument of post-secular scholars, and so it's actually a very huge, wide swath of studies. So you get post-secular law, post-secular fashion, post-secular international relations, really fascinating stuff. But the basic argument is that the secular world is dying. The secular world has basically depleted itself. It's trying to find solutions that it itself is to problems it itself is creating. And so modern secularism is dying, and more cultures are going back, or populations are going back to culture and custom and tradition. I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much ethnocentricity today, and what Michel Mafosoli referred to as neo-tribalism. He predicted that back in the 1970s and 80s, that as the modern secular world begins to erode, you're going to see a resurgence of religion for sure, which we are. And you're going to see a resurgence of what he called tribalism, which is people going back to their ethnic and racial allegiances. We saw that in its violent outworkings, obviously, in Rwanda and the Balkans and the like. And we're seeing it working itself out politically, I think, here in the States with Black Lives Matter and La Raza, the new white nationalism, and so on. And what post-secular scholarship basically said, the promise was that many populations are actually just going back to simple national sovereignty, and they're done with the globalist structures, the globalist world, and they want to return to sovereign expressions such as border security and economic security, and celebrating their cultures, their customs and traditions, rather than denigrating them as bigoted and all kinds of phobic and the like. And I have to say, I didn't really believe it. I knew it was happening in Russia. I knew it was happening in India. I knew it was happening in Africa, and Middle East, but the West, forget it. And then I'll never forget June 23rd, 2016, Brexit. More Brits voted to leave the EU than had ever voted for a politician or political party before. A few months later, Donald Trump. And all of a sudden, I started to see all the things these scholars, these post-secular scholars, were arguing. I started to see it actually happening. The globalist, kind of modernist world was breaking up, and a new political order around national sovereignty and conservatism and traditionalism was emerging. And I said, I gotta tell people about this. So I ended up just throwing out as many books as I could, as quick as I could, to give people different angles of this post-secular world that's rising. And it's not without its difficulties. Obviously the question is, can we hold together in the midst of all this? It's going to be a big question over the next 10 years, no question. But by the same token, there's some exciting new possibilities as well.
Brother, it's a great way to conclude this. Again, I want to thank you. Speaking to my listeners, this is Dr. Steve Turley. You can learn more about him, pick up some of his books at turleytalks.com. And brother, I just want to thank you so much. Hope we can have you come back sometime to talk about a few things, because man, there's all sorts of things happening in this country, man.
It sure is.
Breath and wait 3 minutes and boom, something new's coming up.
That's right.
It's absolutely amazing.
I'd love to, Corbin. Thank you so much for having me on the channel.
Thank you, brother.